We are joined by Daniel Jose Older and Brittany N. Williams. How are you guys doing? So nice to see you.
We're good. Great. Happy to be here. Great to meet you guys.
It's great to meet you. It's funny. We had Brittany on the show. It was 3 years ago, and I know it was 3 years ago because it was when The Empire Strikes Back from a Certain Point of View came out, and Jedi Certain Point of View just is days away, I think, from hitting shelves if it's not out already. And so I had the great opportunity to talk to her then, but I also didn't have Nick as my co-host at that time, so it was just me. And where do we start? I'm very happy. I felt like I had to strong arm a little bit because we've had everybody but Daniel on the show. We've had Kevin, we've had Claudia, and you were like the missing link, the one that we needed to. Now we got the full set of the High Republic
collection. The elusive Daniel Jose Older.
Amazing. Well, I'm happy it finally worked out.
I'm so excited it did. So maybe just real quickly for the few people who may not know who you guys are, maybe just introduce yourselves real quick, and then we'll jump into some conversation.
Yeah.
Oh, me start?
Yeah, you start.
Daniel Jose Older. I'm the author. My first ever Star Wars thing actually was in the first Certain Point of View anthology for A New Hope. And it's called Born in the Storm. And it's a short story about a stormtrooper. And from there on out, a disgruntled stormtrooper who goes AWOL. And from there on out, I wrote Last Shot, a Han and Lando novel. And then I got sucked into the world of the High Republic, where I'm one of the lead story architects and the author of the ongoing High Republic Adventures comic series and Trail of Shadows and a bunch of books and manga and other things.
That's
hi, and I'm Brittany N. Williams. I'm an actor and an author. I wrote the L337 story in Faith and an Old Friend from A Certain Point of View, Empire Strikes Back anthology. And I also have a young adult historical fantasy series that has just started on the shelves. Book one is called That Selfsame Metal, and the series is called The Forge and Fracture Saga. So.
Right. There's non-Star Wars stuff that I write too. That's a good question. I don't only write Star Wars.
He just writes. This man has 19 books out. Book number 20 is about to hit. Yeah. So don't let him fool you.
Yes,
a Star Wars story.
Right. Yeah, I do other stuff besides Star Wars.
Well, that's fantastic. And of course, we're going to talk about some Star Wars things as we go along the way. But for anybody that's listening that may not know, Brittany and Daniel are also married, husband and wife. And, that's another key part of your story, which is so awesome that y'all are authors, that you're actors, that you've worked not only on your own things, but on Star Wars things together. So we're going to wind it all the way back to the beginning a little bit. Tell us about the two, how y'all met, how y'all got together. Tell us that story.
All right. Let me do this.
Right.
So,
and this is going to be a classic marriage test because you're going to tell the story and somewhere along the line, she's going to jump in. Yeah.
It would also be weird if we were calling in from the same house, but we weren't married. We're just in the same frame.
It's like the diaper. It's like the diaper changing thing from your first episode of your podcast too. So.
Right, exactly.
I went and found him for you.
Our spouses would be so confused.
Anyway. Go ahead, tell the story.
Tell the story, babe. There's so many versions. Where do we begin? She wrote an article. Her first published essay was in a publication called Black Nerd Problems, and it was about Black Panther's donk, basically.
No. You're mixing two together. You're mixing Superman got a donk.
See, I already messed it up. Superman does have a donk.
It was I love Wakanda. Black Panther Wakanda doesn't give a fuck.
Right. Yes, I found my people.
Yes, I found my people.
So anyway, that was her first publication. Both of them were great, but that was the first one. The writer Nora Jemison put it on my timeline on Facebook. And I was like, who is this? And, I read the article and I was like, this is so good. And I was like, who wrote it? And I was like, she's hot. And then I found her across the socials, not in a stalkerish way, but in an admiring fan way. And I just, I reposted the article and followed her. And she was like, who is this? Oh, he's a writer and he's hot. And then she followed me back. And then, some time passed and she was in a Shakespeare show off Broadway. She was in basically it was like
off.
It was a workshop. It was a workshop in a black box theater, but literally on Broadway though. It was like right around the corner from Broadway.
It was on like 40. Yeah.
But anyway, it was a basically it's called Margaret the First, and it was a compilation of Margaret scenes from across the War of the Roses series, in Shakespeare.
Mm-hmm.
Shakespeare Expanded Universe, and she was playing Joan of Arc. Exactly. So, she had a sword in her hand, and she was kicking ass all over the stage and just being, her fine self. And I was like, oh my God! But I still took my time. That was when we first met, in person, and I think we kind of knew, but we were also like, let's, we just met, and then Comic-Con was coming up, and we went on our kind of first like date. Then and it was and then we got married.
First date, then we got married. That's good.
Not that.
No, it took a year or two. But.
No, we just got married.
Yeah.
I say just.
It went fast.
Yeah. It's been. What is time? Time is.
What is time?
So that's it.
That's basically the story.
Yeah,
and you got it right. It sounds like that's good. That's good. That's great. So did you find that you have like similar like styles and interests like when you started to dig in? Because like it's one thing to meet a fellow nerd or a nerd who happens to be an attractive person to you, but did you find like, oh, you like that, or was it like different styles of nerddom?
So the thing that got me was when he came to see the show. At the end, we were talking, and he was like, "Yeah, Richard III is my favorite Shakespeare play," and I was like, "Oh my God, it's mine too!" So
it was over from that point on.
It was.
Because that's kind of a deep. It's not a deep cut like a lot of people.
Most people are like, "Oh, I love A Midsummer Night's Dream,"
right?
Or, I love Romeo and Juliet.
And to be clear, I wasn't just showing off. That isn't really my
mine too.
So that was definitely one moment. And then I think like as we kept talking, we do have different fandoms, but they overlap in very specific ways that work. And then I think our approach to our fandoms is similar, right? So even if like, I haven't seen that much Cardcaptor Sakura, but the way that she watches it and understands it, I can understand. And, similarly with like across the board, the different things that we love. And then the parts that we cross over, are really cool. We both love Shakespeare. She knows a lot more about Shakespeare, but we both love Shakespeare a lot. Star Wars for sure. There's just
I don't
anime.
know a whole lot about the Watergate scandal, but everything.
Yes, I'm a Watergate nerd. I was
really?
11. Yeah. And for some reason, not because I was alive when it happened, to be clear, but because my mom was and still is, and she raised me to be a Watergate nerd. And so obviously that. And a Star Wars nerd.
Right. So
yeah,
as they connect, they do.
They do. They really do. But anyway, so it works.
That's great. So do you find that you with that similar sort of interests, do you influence each other's work at all while you're working? Or do you like, how do you, I imagine when you're both writing, like it's, well, I don't know. I mean, everybody's got their own sort of approach to it. And you started to share a little bit of that from... The dog is angry.
Sorry, the mail just came. Our security detail is on it.
Luna, yeah, basta.
Okay, so yes, so we tend to talk out like story points and plot points together. Oh, sorry.
Oh my God.
Everyone is.
My God.
It's okay, we're good.
Yeah, you're good.
So yeah, we tend to talk out like plot points and story stuff together. It's interesting because when I signed with my literary agent for the first time, she was like, "Oh yeah, your work is really in conversation." I mentioned Daniel. She was like, "Yeah, your work is really in conversation with Daniel Jose Older's work." And I was like, "Yeah, it's funny because he's my husband." And she was like, "What?"
My favorite was one of your friends, like early on. One of her friends was like hit her up and was like, "Yo, your man looks a lot like Daniel Jose Older. Have you ever noticed that?" I was like, "Wow, I've reached that level of famous."
No, but right. We break story together.
We do.
I know a lot of Star Wars secrets that I will never tell anyone because We keep it,
because you technically don't actually even know
right.
them.
I technically don't know them, but
it never happened.
Right. It never happened.
Through osmosis, because I talk in my sleep.
Right. The wedding band is an NDA.
Indeed.
That's right. It's its own circle of trust.
Right.
True.
But Daniel's the only person who read the first draft of my novel. We talk out other story stuff together. And we also have similar like tastes in literature and in like when we break down other people's other stories, when we talk about the shows that we watch and everything, our analysis falls along very similar lines. So yeah.
And that helps because then we also use like reference points. Like that part and whatever. It's kind of like that, but with this twist or whatever. But it's true, we do, and I think that's really a sacred form of connection in that, because I don't take it for granted, basically, that like not every married couple can even exist in the same room with each other for very long, let alone, and not every friendship can survive sharing, stories and reading each other's work. Like certainly, lesser relationships have been destroyed over it. But it's really a key part of like, I mean, the thing is, we've always had really strong communication, like from the very beginning. We've always known how to have hard conversations and talk to each other about what matters and get to the heart of things. And that's the skill that you need to be able to talk about your work with someone. You have to be able to remove your ego and, really get into what is working and what is not. You have to be able to put things forward and let them go. Whether it's about your own work or about the other person's work. If you give suggestions, there's a moment when you have to just give a suggestion and then let it cook and walk away. So, and all these things are not for nothing too, part of the practice of being a writer in a community of writers, on a team of writers, like with the High Republic. So all of that, feeds into each other, I think, in a really positive way. I've learned a lot about writing, from her, and I hope vice versa. And also, not for nothing too, because we're both multi-hyphenates in different directions. I was a theater nerd in high school, but not recently. She's a theater nerd through and through, her entire life. And to, directs, plays, performs, all this stuff. And writers have a lot to learn from other forms of art. And I know that as someone who does music and someone who draws, but also like everyone who does different kinds of art can teach a writer a whole lot if we're paying attention and willing to listen. So that, I think, has grown both of us in incredible ways.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely hear the thread of teamwork in, the work that you do, the writing, the creative stuff that you both do. One, I'm really excited to hear that because my wife and I have just in the last less than a week have embarked on a new little side quest venture where we're going to be working together. And we have a great relationship. We've been married for 18 years and I'm excited to see some of these same things you're talking about as far as both having areas of expertise, seeing where that crosses over, how to help and learn and grow with each other. But speaking of what you're talking about and with the teamwork, you also have a young child in the house. So that takes everything to a whole nother level. So I have a twofold question for you. Does that fold into, the way, dad needs work time, mom needs work time. Obviously, you're able to get each other's backs. But maybe even more than that, has having a child here almost coming on 2 years, has that crept into your work in places that you've noticed in the way you're looking at the things you're writing? Maybe certainly for Daniel, with High Republic, Brittany with, your novel coming out, which has probably been in the works longer. But have you seen becoming a parent impact the writing and the work that you're doing?
Yes. Zoe, first question first. Yes.
It really is a balancing act, like even outside of just getting work done and having work time, because it is a parenting, especially right now when we can't be in proximity to each other at all times. So your access to the community that you would otherwise have helping you raise your kid, you don't have that, or we haven't had that. So it's just been like the two of us rolling, handling all of this 24/7. And sometimes you just, as a parent, you just need a break. You just need a minute. Like we absolutely love your kids, adore your kids, everything. But, at the end of the day, sometimes we just need like just a minute.
Gotta tag out.
So, it's really nice to be able to hand off duties and like between parenting, having 2 dogs, maintaining a household, being full-time freelancers who work from home. Like there's a lot of stuff to juggle between the two of us. And so I think we've been pretty good at like passing it off. And we do struggle sometimes, but that's absolutely normal.
But I think too, like the fact that we had a couple of years of experience at being partners in work, and not so much in the sense that like we haven't really collaborated in the sense of like writing something as a team yet. We have the podcast, which is new. We could talk about that for sure. But just being able to talk about our work, you know, which is kind of like a child in some ways, not the same, but definitely, you know, there's connections, and in the same way, you know, having to take your ego out of the equation, sometimes having to push through exhaustion in different ways, you know, having to be able to get into the nitty gritty of things. Like a lot of those conversations really did teach us and kind of train us in how to deal with a lot of things that come up as parents. And you know, you have to have hard conversations with each other as parents. You have to make impossible decisions, especially in the COVID era. You know, there's so many challenges that are so complex to navigate alone, let alone with a partner. So I do think like we've had a lot of practice, and that's helped a lot for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hot potato. You know, we recently brought in a nanny in the past couple months that's been really, really helpful. And that's really only for like 2 hours a day, some days. So yeah, but it's been a challenge. It's been amazing. But to your other question, I've really noticed it creeping in ways that I wasn't planning to. I just like, you know, I've been writing both middle grade and young adult in the High Republic a lot. And so many of those relationships, there's a built-in conversation about parenthood in the master relationship. You know, the master and apprentice relationship is ripe for that. And the joy of writing in the High Republic is that they're not all about to freaking die, which is really cool. Like you're right, Jedi who are not doomed, especially kids. Like there's no other era of Star Wars that you get to do that in, really. And so it's really, really been gratifying to have these kids, you know that at least not all of them are going to die. I can't make any promises, but they're not all doomed. There's no Order 66 over everything. And so,
you know, Kevin Scott, when it comes to these,
no promises. But like, you know, so we get to really develop these relationships with their masters, and like from being, you know, really young and growing up and understanding that, especially in a galaxy that's changing really fast, that's becoming at war. All these kids grew up in peacetime. And suddenly they're on the front lines of this battle with the Nile. And so there's so many important and amazing and complex conversations to have about mentorship and what it means to raise a child and what it means to practice detachment in a loving way, you know, which is what the Jedi are always having to struggle with in different ways. And I've just really loved being in that conversation with myself and with my fellow authors and with the larger High Republic and with the fandom as well.
Yeah, and I'll say for me, it hasn't changed what I've written. It has changed the way I consume media. It's just all of the parenthood stuff hits way harder, and it's made me a lot more emotionally compromised when I'm watching certain things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Not in a bad way, but you know. I find that I'm watching and analyzing more children's media because that's what we're watching right now. And just, you know, really kind of figuring out, okay, gauging what is he taking from this? What is this the best thing to watch right now? How stimulating something is. Like, is this too much for him to watch right now? Should we shift to something else? We've been watching old Disney animated movies and really like looking at the art and you know, the art style, the storytelling and all of that, and really getting into it, trying to figure out like the difference between like watching. We only let him watch like pieces of Across or Into the Spider-Verse versus letting him watch like all of The Sword and the Stone, or let him watch all of Kiki's Delivery Service versus, you know, just parts of Moana.
But also seeing what he connects to, right? Like I think intuitively I would have always thought, oh, it's going to be all the really exciting, like adventure run around stuff, you know, but like Bluey is a huge show for a reason.
Yes.
And
absolutely.
Totally fascinated by it. There's almost no chase scenes except the pizza girls.
No, there's
very few chase scenes.
Yeah, Feather Wand.
Right. But it's not like this high intensity, like constantly, you know, and it's very domestic and very quiet in a lot of ways, but also very zany and fun in a lot of other ways. And he locks onto it, and he's seen the episodes thousands of times, and we have too, and it's so good. Such quality writing, and there's so much care and love put into the characters and the emotions and the connections. It's just so cool to see him, watching that. I just remember it was like He-Man for us. No shade to He-Man, but like there wasn't a lot of like emotional growth to take out of it. It was like work out,
Well,
it's another new weird bad guy and muscles.
Right, exactly. They all had exactly the same bodies and exactly the same muscles.
Right.
Twisted the waist,
like,
arms.
the man runs around in fur underpants.
Fur underwear.
Oh, no shade to that, but it's nice that
it's a
he
wild
has
time.
something different.
That's right. Well, you said something that always fascinates me, or I'm attracted to, which is classic Disney movies. So I have to ask the question: what has been the favorite? Y'all may have had favorites growing up because y'all, of course, grew up with them like I did. Right. What's your favorite of the classic Disney movies?
Oh man,
this is a Disney girl right here. So
right.
that's
I'm
a complicated answer.
Like literally work Disney or like
Impossible
Disney World, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm gonna throw a curveball in here because my favorite classic Disney movie isn't animated. It's Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
It's partially animated, but it's
That's
like
right.
It is. It's amazing.
It's just so weird. Like Angela Lansbury as this woman who's become like a witch through this mail order witch school.
That's right.
And she finds the guy who like runs the school and he's like, no, I was sending you fake stuff. And she's like, but the spells have been working.
Yep.
And then she
kicks Nazi ass.
And these three random kids who like are escaping the Blitz. And like, I didn't know why they got sent to Angela Lansbury's house. Like when I was a kid. And now I understand because I understand more about like what was happening during World War II in England. And so like it's just so they go underwater. They meet the Lion King.
I would not have guessed that was your favorite.
I loved that movie. I used to my aunt had a bed frame that had a little knob at the end. And I would try to get it to
I love that. That's fantastic.
So yeah, that's mine. That's classic, but if we come more contemporary than Aladdin's my absolute favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. Aladdin's up there for me, just because I remember seeing it in the theater and just how amazing that experience was.
I saw it multiple times in the theater.
Sure you did. Yeah. I don't know if I did, but I loved it then. More recently, I love like that weird era, like the Lilo and Stitches and so good.
Before the end of the Florida studio.
Right.
Yeah.
Treasure Planet, Atlantis, like some of those which I didn't see when they were out. I saw more recently here, and I love them so much.
But take it back further. We're talking like Aristocats, The Sword and the Stone.
Sword and the Stone.
Okay.
Yeah. I would say Sword and the Stone and Robin Hood. Those are mine.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
we watched those countless times.
I'm pretty sure I still have a crush on Maid Marian from that Robin
Hood. So many people realize who they are because of this. That's a beautiful thing. Whatever you are, that's
wherever you went. That's right.
What did Robin Hood do to us?
That's right. What did he do?
It is all hers. But anyway,
I still whistle that theme on a regular basis.
Yeah,
so good.
Yep. And the what it keeps getting in my head recently is the Sword in the Stone song where they're underwater. We'll sing it, but it keeps getting in my head.
Stop and go.
That's
go round.
It's back. It's back. We got you again.
Got him.
Now you did it.
Got him.
Classic. So the animation is so good. Like we were rewatching it, and it's just like the expression and the fluidity and just everything about it is incredible.
And you can see the pen and the pencil lines on it. And we watched the opening to Beauty and the Beast, and that was one of the first movies where they were bringing in computer animation, and it looked so like sleek and slick, especially on our like 4K HD TV.
Oh yeah, you see the strokes. You see the yeah. Well, one of my favorite things about one of my favorites is not that Nick asked me, but I'm going to answer anyway. I love Fox and the Hound. Even though Fox and the Hound still makes me cry and kills me. But one of the things you were just talking about, the art style, and it's one of those really interesting things that you don't realize like until I was reading about it, because I've friends in animation, and just when the bear attacks, how they have the bear fill the entire screen so that you get that sense of how large he is and how how dangerous, and just those sort of things that Disney did with those classic animated films, whether it was style or whatever. It was pretty wild.
Yeah, I remember the behind the scenes for The Lion King where they showed the animators in like that auditorium they had, and they brought in real lions, and they would be sketching the lions and stuff.
Yep.
It's the art, the craft, all of it is just great.
It's all fantastic stuff. But so speaking of classic, let's go back to Star Wars for just a minute. I mean, we do talk Star Wars here most of the time, but I'm loving this sort of additional insight. So I know, Brittany, you told me your story about seeing Star Wars for the first time. We'd be happy to hear it again, but I'd love to hear Daniel's, and I'd love to think about it. Tell us your Star Wars experience and why it stuck with you. You think why you think it had the impact on you. So
yeah, I mean, the quick answer to that is actually probably fear. Because I was 3 years old and Return of the Jedi was in the movie theaters, and it was the first movie I saw in a movie theater, and the Rancor bit hit, and I went running out of the theater screaming my head off.
Did you really?
Yes, absolutely. You know, I'd never seen anything that big before. I'd never been in a movie theater. I'd never seen a screen that big, and then there's a monster on it trying to eat you, and it still holds up. Like watching it now, that scene still feels really vivid. Like it doesn't feel like a puppet to me watching it. Maybe that's the memory response, but at the time, you know, I was just totally amazed by it, and I went back in, and I couldn't, like, it's not like I left the theater forever. Like I went back in, and that's to this day, you know, one of my favorite sequences. Not just the Rancor, the whole of Jabba's palace completely immersed me, and I just felt weirdly at home in it. Like I can honestly tell you, it just felt true in a way that just resonated. Like as much as it was aliens, it was like, yes, that's so real. And shortly after that, they did the behind the scenes documentary. Yeah, and I remember being on TV. And this is back in the VHS, you know, tape it off the TV era. And I remember like we wanted to tape it so bad, and we just watched it over and over. And it was all the creature shop stuff, and just seeing the latex and the foam and how they came together, and the puppeteers. And I was just in love with it. Like I just wanted to be a creature shop worker, and thought about it all the time. Made my own creatures, you know, with Play-Doh, covered them with latex, and, you know, made these little maquettes and animated them and everything. So it was that world of monsters. And I think the tension and the harmony between monsters and humans, just living in this world together in a very natural way. I was always drawn to that, because after that too, it was the Muppets Take Manhattan. I think it was the next movie that I saw. And loved that, you know, and so that world and that dynamic, I just always loved from then on out. Played with the action figures, you know, my whole childhood, and yeah, it was a wrap. That was it. That was it.
Did you? I have to ask, because we have our friend Chris Ryans, who is one of our co-hosts on Friday nights, and he's a huge comic book guy, and he always gives us a hard time because I'm almost embarrassed to say it, Daniel, but we don't read a lot of comics between Chris and I. We try. I did just read the Max Rebo. I know he's got it behind him, which was
I still don't have my copy.
Which was very cool. But I think the challenge for me with comics, and I'd love to get your opinion, and when Chris listens to this, he's going to be like, how dare you ask in this? But I think because, you know, I was 7 when the first Star Wars came out. And so much like you, play with action figures was all. So these stories that I created in my head were the backstories. And I wonder if one of the reasons why it's difficult for me sometimes to get into the comic book stories, which do such a great job, honestly, of sharing those backstories and helping them. I wonder if there's something in my brain that's like, no, that's, you know, that horrible gatekeeper kind of perspective, which it makes me crazy. But I wonder if there's a disconnect for me somehow when I see, you know, you do War of the Bounty Hunters, and I'm like, oh, but is that really what Zuckus would have said? You know, but do you think that maybe that inspired some of the work that you've done because you had been building these stories yourself?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I mean, I vividly remember sitting down the first time to write Last Shot. I had signed the contract and I knew I had to write it, but I was like, can I write this book? I'd never written IP before. I'd never written in anybody else's world. And I just had no idea, like, if it was going to flow out of me. I knew I would get it done, but I didn't know how long it would take or what the process would feel like. And I sat down and I started writing that first scene. And immediately I was like, oh my God, like this Han Solo's voice has been in my head my entire life, like literally. And if it isn't me playing with the figures, like I've also just seen the movie so many times that all I had to do was be like, can I hear Harrison Ford saying this line?
Right.
And if I could, it would stay. And if I couldn't, I had to change it. And the same went with, William December Williams and writing Lando and figuring out if those lines worked. Like, there's such iconic voices. And that was really a guide. And that really did like bring me into, and it was perfect that was my first novel, because it's really what tugged me into the whole galaxy. And from there, it's always been a question, like, can you hear, well, even if it's not a specific character or a specific actor, is this a line that would work in that world?
Right.
Like that. And that's, it's tricky. It's always a balancing act. It's always trying to find that and also push it, so that we always grow as a galaxy too.
Yeah.
But no, I hear you. Like, it's this complex dynamic of like a very huge open world with all these characters and all this canon, and is it canon or not, and all these different kind of conversations happening. And all you can do is like just like fit it in, the pieces into place the best that you know how, and roll with it. And at the end of the day, it should be fun. And that's also my kind of like go-to question is like, are we having fun here? Is this is this a good time that's also talking about something deep? Because Star Wars has always talked about deep stuff.
Right.
So it's that balance.
Yeah.
Well, and thinking about it from that perspective, and you kind of tag on to what Pete's saying, if you think about a background character, like we saw all the Cantina aliens in Star Wars in the first one. And so it's easy to make up our own stories. But like you talking about Last Shot, but even for Brittany writing the L3 story, these are very clearly defined voices. You've got Lando, you've got Han. L3, for somebody we get only in that movie for that little bit of time, that is a very clearly defined voice. Surely it's easier and comforting, maybe is even the word I'm looking for, to write from the perspective of a defined voice like that, as opposed to having to try and go, what would Dengar say? What would like, it's something more.
Right.
No, it's just a different kind of challenge, because then there's like, you're up against the expectation, like everybody else's expectation of what that voice sounds like and what they're gonna be.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's funny because I really did have a couple moments writing the Max Rebo one specifically where I was like, this intersects so directly with the events of Return of the Jedi, with my actual favorite scene in all of Star Wars, that I kind of had to hesitate a little bit to be like, I don't know if I want to tell the story. Like, I don't know if I feel comfortable saying what was going on with Max Rebo in the midst of all the events of Jedi. And at the end of the day, like, I had to let that go, as much as I was feeling very precious about it. And bringing in the two drummers in part helped because they weren't in the version that I first saw as a kid.
Right.
They're the add-ins. So that was like little tricks that I kind of tricked my mind out of being like, okay, this is not a sacred text. Like, you have to, as a writer, be playful with even like, what is to us kind of like a Bible. You still have to be able to move in and out of it smoothly and like bring it to life. Otherwise, it's just going to feel very tense, and you can't write,
and I think it was so brilliant with those two drummers, because when I got that issue and I started reading what you wrote, it was one of those kind of light bulb moments. I was like, oh yeah, those guys. Like, I hadn't thought about those guys in 25 years. But all of a sudden, when I saw it in the comic, I was like, I know exactly who we're talking about. It was immediately fresh. Like, it really was a great way to do that. Like, it was brilliant. It really was. So.
I appreciate that. And I also use them because there's no storytelling about them at all. And I knew I had to set up this like complex Reservoir Dogs dynamic of like brother killing brother, or maybe having to kill brother. And I was like, these two guys, ain't nobody written a damn thing about them. They are wide open. I don't even think there's much in Legends about them. So, it's just very easy to like toss them in there, as opposed to Max, who has lore and lore and lore. And
a really obsessed fan base, which recently I've discovered. The Max Rebo.
Max and Droopy both. Wow. There's a whole world out there.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had to just tune out all of that. No offense to them.
Right. All respect to the Max Rebo fans.
Yeah.
All respect to DJ Clulo and Kristen Baver, who are on their own path.
Bless them.
With Max and Droopy both.
Head of the fan club.
Yeah.